Oop. I gotta make an adjustment. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's live stream. Oop, hang on, gotta close the door. All right. Trying to wear a dark shirt so that you guys have a good background to see the fly against. I'm working on figuring out a way to get both better quality audio and video. But for now, this is as good as it gets. Let's see. So today we're excuse me. Today we're going to be tying a freestyle fly, and my goal for today is to do the body work for this fly. But I also want to talk to you guys a little bit about where you can find inexpensive materials. I know finding materials can be really difficult, especially if you're just starting out in the craft. And it it really doesn't have to be terribly difficult. There will be some things that you will need to buy, particularly if you want to tie like the really classic patterns. But that doesn't mean you can't use like the cheap stuff to practice. You can practice your body work. You can practice your winging techniques. Oop. So yeah, so we're just going to dive right in. Today, for the body work, I'm going to be using one of my favorite seal substitutes, which is Angora goat. This is a waspy selection. And yeah, we'll just see what comes of that and what color combination looks good on the hook. I will for the ribbing, I will be using some of this very fine craft store gold lace, which is actually gold embroidery thread. The stuff's great. It looks because of the way it's wound, it looks slightly antique, which I like. And it's cheap. It's $3 or $5 a skein at your local craft store. Now, in terms of feathers, I will be using kind of the higher quality versions of some feathers, just because that's what I have on hand. I don't have a lot of craft store feathers just laying around. But one thing that I will be using that may surprise people is I will be using some parrot and macaw. And one of the reasons for that is parrot and macaw are actually fairly readily available. You just need to know where to look. Where I've gotten most of my macaw feathers and parrot feathers actually are from pet shops and friends who own parrots. And so my friends who own macaws or parrots or parakeets will send me bags of feathers. And then I will sort them out into, sort them out. Sort them out by, color, size. So these are some very nice orange with the blue tip. Then these are the yellow with the blue tip. Blue body feathers, I think, mostly in here. And then some smaller blue body feathers. So yeah. And if you have a local pet shop, these birds, they molt these feathers all the time. They're constantly shedding them. And so oftentimes they're just swept up and thrown away. And, you can ask for a bag, or you can ask, if they ever, whenever they sweep up the feathers, if they could just pick out some of the nicer ones, or you could even go through them yourself. And that's a really easy way to accumulate feathers. It's also a really good way to accumulate feathers that you don't need. There's a lot. Uh, there was a stage where I had bags and bags of these little tiny feathers, maybe thousands of these little tiny feathers. And if you think about a fly with body veilings, you only have two, four, or six body veilings on a fly. You don't need thousands and thousands of feathers. So it pays to be a little bit picky at the beginning when you're collecting feathers. If you're going to go that route, if you're going to go the pet shop, friends with birds uh, route. So the only, like I said, if you're going to tie the classic patterns, you will need to buy some feathers or acquire some feathers. Uh, if you want any of the bustards or some of the nicer, if you want to tie with swan, you will need to find sources for purchasing those. And I've always said that and when I'm buying feathers, I buy from John McClain at feathersmc.com. There are a couple of other vendors out there though, that I don't have experience with, so I'm not gonna. John's always been really useful or really helpful, and really quite kind, um, especially to new tires. Uh, and then, like I mentioned before, there are certain things that you can buy at your local Michaels or AC Moore's or I don't know, some of the other equivalents, Hobby Town, Hobby Lobby. I don't know. Uh, there are some decent feathers that you can find, in particular, peacock sword feathers, for your Jock Scotts. But so anyway, I'm gonna dive right in, and um, for the floss, I will be using silk for the floss because that's what I have. The embroidery silks that they have can be a little tricky to use because they are multiply wound, and um, my suggestion is if you're starting out, one of the first things you should buy are uh, kind of the flat Japanese styles or French style embroidery silks, because that will make your body work easier and nicer uh, very quickly. And they're cheap. The French silks, I think you can find. Oh, it's been a while, but maybe like $7 a spool, and the Japanese silks are $11 a cardboard tube. So, a little bit more expensive than your craft store embroidery floss, but they go on to the hook nicer, and they are easier to work with in this application. And you don't need to have every color. I think I'm rocking. Uh, yeah, I have 6 colors of Japanese silk and well, 5 colors of French silk right now. And you'll need the basics. Excuse me. Um, you'll need the basics. Yellow, orange, for tags, red, uh, black, uh, a light blue, a dark blue, Highlander green if you want to tie green Highlanders, but I don't know. I think black, black, yellow, and orange, and then a blue are probably the most useful colors. Um, Red. Did I say red? Yeah. Okay. Anyway, getting into this. Again, I'm using this grass store lace silk. I'm just going to pull out one of the threads since it is a five five ply, I think, maybe four ply. Goes on fine. And the other thing you'll need to buy, probably specialty, if you are using. Can I break this down anymore? Actually, yeah. Okay. A lot of these, embroidery silks, or embroidery threads, both the Japanese silks and the craft store threads, are multi-ply, and they can be broken down further. So all I'm doing is just untwisting the lace into its component threads. There you go. So get two individual threads out of it, and that will just make it a little bit finer for the tip. I'm using gold. Gold is not my favorite color, but you know, some plies call for it, so gonna use it. And I happen to have a lot of this on hand. Uh, Now, I will say it is a little bit more fragile in the sense that it's not so finely made as, say, um, a fly tying tinsel or like an antique tinsel. Um, so you do have to be a little bit careful about running your fingers over it a lot because it will unwind, it will unravel significantly faster if roughly handled. 5 turns, 4 or 5 turns. I'm just going to turn the axis, bind down the tags. Again, just because I'm using, craft stone materials doesn't mean I can't practice good technique. So everything gets tied on at the back side of the hook, and then wind my thread forward flat. I think the other thing that is worth buying early on is good thread. Um, this is and I guess it kind of goes without saying a lot of threads are good, but like buying the proper threads. So threads that will go on flat, um, unwaxed threads that won't, that you can untwist to a sufficient degree to get them to go on flat. I think that's really important. And the other thing that you'll need to buy is if you want to tie on blind eye hooks, you will need to buy blind eye hooks special, and also gut for the eyes, because those are not standard things that you can pick up at your local Cabela's or Orvis or um, Bass Pro Shop or whatever. Okay, so tag. What should we do with the tag? Um, this is a freestyle fly, so I think I'm going to go a little bit unusual. I'm just kind of looking at the colors of dubbing that I have and thinking about what kind of colors I want to go down the body and what order. I'm a huge fan of having a very bold and contrasting colored tag on my freestyle flies. Um, oh yeah, and I forgot. If you don't want to buy uh, Japanese silks or French silks, you can buy the rayon, like the Danville rayon floss. The only issue that I have with these is that they are very obviously uh, synthetic, or well, rayon. They they have a different shimmer to them that is just not silk. Most of these other things, like you can't tell, but the rayon to me kind of has this like crinkly shimmer to it, um, that I just don't like. So, you know, um, but that you can use them. They go on just the same as silk. They're a little bit coarser, uh, but yeah, that's a personal preference for me. All right, so looking at these colors, I think I'm going to tie a blue bodied fly. I'm wondering if. Oop, so I have my little tray of silk. Do I go a like a teal blue body, or do I go for a? So I have these two blues right here, and I have this kind of teal blue here, and it's a little bit hard to see on the camera, but it does match pretty well. Okay, that's nice. I like that. It kind of matches this light blue Angora goat, so I think I'm going to go with that. And I realize that that's not contrasting color, so let's make this a little. Let's give this a little contrast. So let's go. What would pop? Okay, so I'm going to go. I actually have this very nice purple French. This is a Legarten silk. So I'm going to make this tag purple, that kind of bright purple. Because that'll contrast nicely if I do a blue body. I will say the one thing I wish somebody would come out with is a more naturally colored selection of Angora goat. Um, a surprisingly large number of flies, particularly from like the early to mid 19th century. So, you know, 1840s, 18 to 1870s, essentially, call for some kind of nondescript brown or gray fur. And um, my I like the way Angora goat looks on a Atlantic salmon fly. Um, so I kind of wish that there was a greater selection of kind of naturally colored Angora goat. And I realize that there isn't, because most of these Angora goat dubbing blends are mostly being used on steelhead flies, uh, where, the prevailing school of thought is kind of against, or is mostly in favor of bright colors. But man, having a set of natural or like earth tone Angora goat dubbing would be pretty awesome for flies like that. Trash can. Okay. So for the tail, um, instead of now, golden pheasant is surprisingly easy to find. Yes, surprisingly, it is a little bit more expensive. I think I found a a golden pheasant crest and neck for like 14 or 16 bucks at an Orvis once. Um, the current golden pheasant crest that I've been using, or the head with the crest I've been using, I found at a green top for I think 11 bucks. Um, so they are available and they're common, but uh, if you want the higher quality crests and necks, you will have to go to a specialty shop. Um, if you go to like an Orvis or a Green Top to buy your golden pheasant, be prepared to pick through, whatever they have, and maybe 1 out of 10 will be nice enough to tie salmon flies with. So um, instead, I'm going to do a mixed tail. So I'm going to take a little bit of macaw, some blue macaw, some pet store blue macaw. No, actually, you know what? I'm going to make that blue and green macaw. I have examples of both. I do have some macaw that I did purchase from a specialty shop, but the macaw that I have been using did actually come from a pet store. Um, and if you don't have a pet store near you, you can often find feathers for sale on eBay. Uh, they may or may not be a good deal. Disclaimer, but they are available on eBay from pet shops that realize they can make a profit selling these feathers, or specialty breeders. So they are available. Just buyer beware. It is eBay. Okay, and what am I going to mix it with? So blue and green macaw. Actually, do I want green macaw? Design choices here. Because the blue macaw I have doesn't actually match the blue dubbing that I have very well. So in that case, maybe go green macaw, and then it's a nice contrasting color. Ooh, I know. I'm gonna go for some teal. There's some green wing teal here, and duck feathers are another great source of inexpensive fly tying material, especially if you know somebody who is a duck hunter. Uh, almost all of my duck, except for the pairs of wood duck. I do get my wood duck pairs from John McLean. But for example, most of my green wing teal comes from a fellow, and I'm sorry I'm blanking on your name, but he comes and visits me at the fly fishing shows, and he always has a bag of green wing teal, and I'm still working through my first bag, the first bag that he ever gave me. But he goes, down south, goes duck hunting, comes back with a bag of feathers that he hands out to tires. And you shouldn't expect such generosity, but it certainly is easier to find duck feathers if you know somebody who is a duck hunter. And I'm willing to bet that most people know someone who is a duck hunter, even whether they know it or not. So duck feathers are readily available. And yeah, just again, take some asking around. It's like bird owners, people who own parrots or macaws. You just got to ask around a little bit to find them. Same thing with turkey feathers. You can find people who, you know, are turkey hunters, who, you can't can't eat the feathers, and if they're not using them themselves, and turkeys have a bucket load of feathers on them, uh, can definitely find people who will be happy to give you some. I again, like I said, I went through a phase where I was collecting all of the feathers that I could, and I have bags and bags of useless feathers. Um, but again, it's because people were, people who I knew who hunted or had owned parakeets or macaws. They're not going to do if they're not doing anything with the feathers, then they're going to be thrown away, and so oftentimes they're more than happy to give them away. All right, so just going to do a couple of a little bit of green macaw, a little bit of teal. We're just going to tie in some strips. So I think I'm going to do. I want to do this. Do I want to do the do I want to veil, like do green macaw and then veil it with the. Yeah, I think so. We'll do like a single green macaw, and because macaw is very good is very good at marrying both to itself and other things. We can almost make it into like make it look like a golden pheasant crest tail. Um, something straight. And what we'll do is we'll take some of this wonderful green wing teal, kind of mix it up a little bit. I have rights and lefts. I'm going to do this bilaterally and do a right and a left, but I am going to just kind of, and I'm going to do that mostly so that like the forces in the, so, the right fibers will want to curve one way, the left fibers will want to curve the other way. And I kind of want all those like curved forces to even out and straighten out so that it kind of sits sits evenly. So the hook I'm tying on is a antique eyed hook, and that's kind of an acknowledgement that most people will be able to find eyed hooks more readily than blind eye hooks. It is appropriate to tie classic salmon flies on eyed hooks. Eyed hooks have existed for a very long time. They were not popular to manufacture, um, because the process of forming an eye on a hook is, bending metal and making a hollow form this small is really tough on machinery. And so making eye hooks was a fairly, well, relative to a blind eye hook was an expensive proposition for the manufacturer. And so um, even though the technology existed to make blind eye hooks, uh, they were not popular to manufacture for a while. Um, Certainly not until ideas and techniques for hardening steel became easier, or became more widespread. Because to form an eye on a hook, you have to bend this uh, wire around a very thin uh, post, um, and that post wears out really quickly, and so you know, from manufacturing standpoint, it's more difficult to make a night hook. It's more expensive to make a night hook. So I'm gonna just trim, but of the tail. As usual, I'm going to wax my thread to bind down what's the leftover fuzz. Just hold it all in. So there's that. Kind of feel like it needs a splash of color. And let me go grab some feathers. Yeah. Like I said, bags and bags of feathers, most of them completely useless. Don't be like me. Be intentional about your feather collecting. Yeah, so here's a bag full of parakeet feathers that I have saved from, I think, probably high school. I'm just going to pick out one of the little red ones. What I really ought to do is go through and pick out the nicer ones and see if I can't make some pairs. And then toss or donate the rest. But it is just a little bit of a pain to go through so many feathers. And I think at this point, well, certainly my wife would not appreciate that, because there would be feathers everywhere for weeks. So anyway, I'm gonna take this feather, gonna repair it. I think I'm gonna, so big. I'm gonna prepare it just like I would say a Indian crow feather or a kingfisher feather. Gosh, I don't know if I can make this feather small enough by trimming it. Okay. Trim up. All right, so I've trimmed it up a little bit unevenly, but it's just so I got stubble down here, and that stubble will help me tie it in so it doesn't rotate. I'm also going to take that portion of the stem right before the feather, and I'm going to flatten it with a pair of flat needle nose pliers, and I'm just going to give it a little bit of a kink. Just going to bend it up. I don't know if you can see that. I don't know how to. Just going to give it a little bit of a kink up so that it doesn't compress the tail a little, or compress the tail too much. I'm just going to tie it on over the tail. And yeah, and that looks pretty attractive actually. Cool. Can bind everything down. And then of course, this would not be a Bradkern fly without a big butt. So I'm going to, as always, wax my thread, keep the fuzzies down. I'm going to use. So ostrich Earl is also available from craft shops. Again, it will be one of those things where you can buy like a package of ostrich Earl, and then you'll need to pick through to find the best feathers. I think I haven't done the math in a while, but I think it still comes out in a favorably economically speaking, to say buying an ostrich plume from one of the big box shops. Red's starting to spray a little bit. But where's it going with that? But yeah, you can definitely find ostrich Earl in a craft shop. And I think you can still find like the gray ostrich Earl dusters. Those are pretty hit or miss. Mostly misses, I believe, from what I've heard. But you also have to think most ostrich Earl that would have been used in the good old days would have been that duster gray color and not actually black, unless they dyed it. And black is a fairly difficult dye color to get right. Sorry, I just got to trim up some fuzzies. So so duster gray is an appropriate color. It's just the ostrich Earl dusters, they're kind of industrial, and the feathers they pick aren't always the best. So the craft store ostrich Earl is also going to be a little hit or miss, but you can at least pick through that to find decent feathers that you can use. So there's a nice spot. Okay. Then I'm going to use some more of that Crest Store gold lace for the rib, but I'm going to leave this 2-ply instead of separating the threads. And like always, that goes on the back side. Gets tied in about 8 o'clock, not quite 9 o'clock, maybe 8 o'clock, 7:30, 8. Just so that when you transition it from when you start wrapping the rib down, the transition isn't so obvious, or where it emerges from the body, I guess is probably a good way to put it, isn't so obvious. Just trim and again, I'm gonna dub the second 3/4 of the fly, so it's not so important that the section under the dubbing is perfectly smooth. It's mostly important for the section under the floss portion. Okay. For the floss, I'm going to use I'm going to start with a lighter color. Sometimes I like to have a contrasting lighter color for the first segment of body. Um, so like if I'm doing like a claret, the shades of claret body, I might use a pale green first segment. Um, um, but in this case, I'm going to use a pale blue segment and then follow it up with the two segments of blue getting progressively darker, and then I'm going to do, I think, check what colors I have. Yeah, and then I'm going to do a dark claret for the final segment, for the most forward segment. All right. Just going to wind my thread forward to get out of the way. Yeah, got some fuzzies. Okay. Okay. Now I'm just going to run my thread forward and back a few times, or down and back, just to tie down these butts. Because again, since I'm tying on dubbing, these butts aren't actually going to get bound down. They won't be thoroughly bound down like I would if I was doing like a floss body. And now I need to decide. Actually, I'm going to back up just a little bit and wax this thread. And the reason for that is one, I think, just from feel the way it feels. I think having a layer of wax under a dubbed body helps the dubbing stick a little bit better. It kind of like sandwiches the fur dubbing fur fibers between waxed portions. And then also it will help the hackle when I tie it in. One of the easy things to do is pull the tip of the hackle out. If you tie a rooster neck feather in by the tip, it's really easy to pull it out, where from the tie-in point. And I think, and I found that waxing my thread before tying in your hackle um, helps just secure the hackle in place a little bit better. So, you know, you dub the body and then you go to wind the hackle and boop, you pull the hackle out, and that's really annoying. Excuse me. I'm talking too much. Anyway, it's really annoying when you pull the hackle out right before you go to wind it. So um, I find that waxing my thread and even just this little extra wax on the body really helps. All right, so hackle. Let's see, we're doing a blue body. So that naturally means we need a red claret. A red claret. Can't read that. Anyway, a red claret hackle. Put some nice contrast in. I am looking for a nicely tapered hackle. This package of hackle has been a little bit picked through, so most of these hackles are not. Most of the leftover hackles, or the remaining hackles, are mostly just good for throats and things because they don't have enough taper to them for a body hackle. This one has enough taper, but I don't know if these fibers are going to be long enough. No, that's okay. Um, Hackles. You can find hackles at craft stores. I've seen them. Oh, do I recommend them though? Uh, Hackles are one of those things where if you want nice quality rooster hackles, you're probably better off buying them from a specialty shop. Uh, from like a fly tying shop. Now, that doesn't mean they'll be expensive. You can find, what they call Indian or Indian cock necks or Chinese necks. Um, Easy enough to find, but and you can find them dyed in colors fairly easy as well because I think they're popular with like bass flies and pike flies. The one thing, if you're tying on smaller hooks, so like 4/0 or smaller, I would recommend staying away from saddles or schlappens, uh, just because those feathers you're gonna have a tough time finding feathers small enough to tie 3/0 hooks. And also they tend to be pretty webby, and webby feathers are can be kind of difficult in this application. Uh, so, but you can find strung rooster neck hackles in lots of colors. Uh, so, sure, you might not be able to find them at your local AC Moore, but you can certainly find them at any fly tying shop easily, or you should be able to. Although I will say, I've been in a couple of Orvises recently where their selection of feathers has been dismal. All right, so just gonna wax up my thread here, and we're gonna do. And this body is divided pretty well into quarters. I'm going to make it's not exact because I kind of want the front quarter, so the quarter closest to the eye to not actually be a quarter, but a little bit larger than a quarter. Um, and that's just because that front segment of the body tends to get swallowed up by the throat and the wing, and the various bits and pieces that go at the front of the fly. So it's oftentimes the front segment of a fly oftentimes looks to be a little bit less significant than the previous segments. Gonna need a little bit more of that blue. So one trick is to make the front segment just a tiny bit longer than the rest of the segments of the fly. Another kind of generality is that darker segments um, will have less impact than lighter segments. So a darker segment of the same length as a segment of say dark blue dubbed body will look shorter than equal length segment of dubbed light blue body. Um, Man, I'm having some trouble pulling this darker blue fur out of the caddy. Come here. All right, well. I need like a hook or something. Okay, so that's a decent dark blue segment, and now we're next my thread just one more time. And this is going to be a dark claret color. Come on, there we go. I will say, so in terms of dubbing, I've actually found just kind of perusing my local Michaels, what I think might make a good dubbing. I haven't tried it. I haven't committed to trying it, but there is. So I don't. There's some wool, like loose wool. That's loose dyed wool that appears to be for I think felting maybe. Uh, and that it looks to be um, like a good candidate for maybe dubbing uh, for use as dubbing in a salmon fly. Haven't tried it. I've looked at it. Haven't committed to trying it, but that may be a good source of dubbing. It does come in a very nice gray color, and more natural colors, but I believe it's sheep's wool. So we'll have to check it out. I know that wool can like raw wool can sometimes be difficult to use because uh, sheep's wool contains a lot of oil called lanolin, and that can make dubbing it a little bit tricky because it won't stick to your thread so well. So, but it's potentially something to look into. All right, so I'm just going to wind, and the main takeaway from today is that it doesn't take you don't have to have the super materials to tie these flies. You can get things from your local fly shop, easy. Um, Today, I might have messed this up already. Yeah. You can get things from your local fly shop. Uh, getting this all tangled up. All right. So you can get, there are fly shop things, the Angora goat, the uh, you can tie it on eyed hooks, um, and then there are things that you can get from craft stores that you don't have to use the super expensive crazy stuff from the specialty shops to tie these flies. All right, so then I'm going to fold the hackle just on the hook. And this folding technique is just bog standard. You just kind of sweep everything to one side of the barbs, and if it's a good quality hackle that hasn't been terribly beat up, it'll just happen. You just got to be a little firm with it, and again, that's why I wax I use wax thread to tie in my hackle, because that way I can put a significant amount of pull on it, and the hackle stem, the rachis of the hackle, would have to snap in order for the hackle to be, you know, ruined, so to speak. Um, I'm not going to pull it out though. Okay. There you go. That's actually a really nice looking body. Um, throat hackle. Let's see. What do I want to do for a throat hackle? Hmm. From a design standpoint, if I had a dark blue hackle that matched the dark blue fur that I'd used, that'd be kind of cool. So if it matched that, but the dark blue hackle that I have is actually a much bluer blue and less of a teal blue or dark teal blue like this is. This is and Waspy's Kingfisher blue, but that tends to be on the more teal side of blue. Whereas the blue hackle that I have is like a true blue. So I think I'm just going to go with a black throat. I think black throats always look attractive. And like I've mentioned before, this is a Chinese rooster neck that I got with the very first fly tying kit that I ever purchased myself. It was like a Cabela's beginner's kit or something out of their catalog back when they were into mailing catalogs and not doing everything online. And I still have it. It's super cheap, but the feathers are perfect for salmon flies. They're not very good for dry flies, but they're perfect for salmon flies. Uh, So let's find good throat hackle. And just to reiterate my technique for like how I space things around the hook. So when I wrapped the hackle, I tied off the body hackle at so if it's 9 o'clock is facing you or facing away from me, facing towards the camera, then it's 3 o'clock here. I tied the body hackle off at 3 o'clock. Yes. I'm going to tie the throat hackle on where I tied off the body hackle. And I always, whenever I tie on a hackle, I always wax my thread, but I also always tie it so that um, the so there are two sides to a feather, right? There's the the bottom side, which is what's facing the skin, and then there's the usually shinier side or the top side, which faces out into the elements. And I always fa- tie it so that the bottom side of the feather is facing in towards the hook. And that way, when I go to uh, fold the hackle, and I'm going to need hackle pliers for this because I accidentally snapped off the feather when I was pulling it off the skin. When I go to fold the hackle, I have one of the shiny sides out, and the dull side is inside the folded hackle. This hackle's folding just a little bit less well, but it's all right. Gonna just wind it. Don't need very many turns of black up front. 2 or 3 is all. Always sweeping the fibers back. And then tie it off. Again, I'm going to tie it off at 3 o'clock. I'm going to trim the whole thing. Just going to bind everything down. And then I'm going to whip finish my white thread like always. And I'm going to switch to black for the head or for completing the wing and the head. But so that is the body of our freestyle. Again, I didn't use any feathers or fur or tinsels that are rare or difficult to find. It's just knowing where to find, being okay with asking people, hey, do you have you own a macaw? Can I have some of the feathers that it sheds? You finding things that are pretty good facsimiles of originals. So uh, craft store lace, metallic lace or embroidery thread. such as this to use in place of tinsels. Um, and remember, the craft store lace comes in a multiply uh, bundle or multiply like cable almost. And I pulled it apart to use a single thread. So I separated it into 4 2-ply threads, and then I took a 2-ply thread and I separated it into 1-ply for the tip, but then I used a 2-ply thread for the rib. You can that is a easy way to use lace, multiple ways. The hackles, you can find strung dyed hackle at your local Orvis. Uh, the tail veiling, which is green wing teal, you can get from a friend who's a duck hunter. We're going to use, I think, for the wing. I haven't quite decided completely for the wing, but I think I'm going to use some pet store or friendly parrot feathers. Sorry, these are parrot feathers. Whole bag of them. We'll probably use some of that, and then maybe some turkey feathers from a turkey that I uh, killed during, I think, the 2017 turkey season. Something like that. It's been a while. Again, the feathers have just been sitting in a bag in my room. So turkey feathers, duck feathers, pheasant feathers are readily available from friends that hunt, or if you hunt yourself. What else? Most pheasants, maybe not so much anymore, but it used to be that you could find whole pheasant skins at Orvis or Cabela's. Maybe not so much anymore, sadly, but um, you used to be able to. Some stores might still have them, but yeah. And then again, your local Michaels or AC Moore's, you can find lots of stuff that can be used. It's just thinking creatively about how you can use it. Finding things like embroidery threads to use. So you don't have to spend a lot of money on salmon flies. And if you're willing to do freestyle salmon flies to practice the techniques, you can go a long ways with, some really kind of budget feathers. It's a different story if you want to tie like the classic patterns, like the Green Highlanders and the Jock Scots. But so you will need some specialty feathers for that, such as jungle cock, or at the very minimum, kingfisher for cheek veilings, tail veilings. So, but don't be afraid to do freestyle flies to start out with. Just make something up, practice those techniques. You can take a pattern like the Green Highlander, and you can substitute all of the rare things for things that are common. So instead of using, you know, Indian crow for the cheeks or the sides that like they have on Green Highlanders, I think. It's been a while since I've tied one. Substitute like a parrot body feather or a cockatoo body feather for that side. Um, and mix up the color scheme. So let's say you have red dubbing, but not Highlander green dubbing. Well, use that red dubbing and replace the green dubbing on the Highlander, and now you have a red Highlander instead of a green Highlander. Uh, that's perfectly fine. It's a new variant, and you can call that your own. So that's you don't just have to take the classic recipes as they are. Um, have fun with it. So we'll continue this fly next week. Yeah, next week. Just a reminder, February 22nd and the 23rd, I will be at Thai Fest in Maryland. I believe it's at the I'll have to double check, but I believe that's at the Marriott, the BWI Marriott by the Baltimore airport. And then March 14th, I will be at the Maryland fly fishing show. Maryland Fly Fishing and Collectible Tackle Show. So that's Saturday, March 14th at Towson University. Come see me if you want to come see me live in person, hang out. That'd be great. And thanks for watching. If you want to see more of my work, it's on Instagram at justwondering.brad. If you want to support the channel or purchase one of my flies, you can check out my Etsy shop. It's Studio 1213 on Etsy. And thanks for hanging out. Again, we'll finish this fly next week with a nice bright wing. Again, using feathers that can be easily found or easily sourced. And thank you very much. Have a good one.